Welcome everybody, my name is Carsten Stöcker, I'm founder of Spherity, and welcome to our Business Wallet Talks. It's the second edition, and today we have a special speaker, Mikael af Hällström from the Finnish Tax Administration. And Mikael is one of the European specialists when it comes to European business wallets, applications in business to government and business to business use cases. I think he's one of the most advanced opinion leaders and visionaries in how European business wallets will be integrated in the core digital infrastructure throughout the European Union. And Mikael is not only kind of looking to business to government use cases, but also B2B use cases, for example, Industry 4.0, digital product passports, data space integration. And the Finnish Tax Administration is also connected to the company business registry in Finland. So that today we have a very, very important speaker here to cover a broad scope. And before I hand over to Mikael, which is an honor to have him in our seminar today, I also want to quickly mention that the speed and the momentum in terms of the European business wallet and identity for legal persons is picking up speed in a super accelerated way, because the European Commission, they have a clear strategy. They have a in Gartner speak, we would say they have a completeness of the vision, how legal person identity, how the European business wallet will be at the core of a European digital infrastructure for business to government and B2B, how it's a prerequisite for kind of transforming Europe in terms of digital sovereignty. If we don't solve the legal person identity topic in an interoperable way through the European Union, it's very difficult to establish, it's impossible to establish a digital sovereignty for the EU. And that's the reason I think the European Business Wallet is a flagship initiative of the European Commission. And the European Commission also kind of published, I think it's exactly 2 weeks ago or a few days ago, they published their single market strategy, and they call it Our European Home Market in an Uncertain World, a strategy for making single market simple, seamless, and strong. And one of the core elements of the single market strategy is legal person identity. And they're talking about European business wallet. It's being kind of established digital identity for economic operators, building on standards that are already established, such as the Business Registry Interconnecting Service, the BRIS, the OID, the European Union Identifier, to do an identification of legal entities throughout the entire European Union. They position the European business wallet for doing business simple and digitally, to also automate a lot of reporting obligations, and they see it as a once only principle. I get a business wallet, I get my legal person identity, I get some know your customer, know your supplier assertions from the registry that I can use for McKinsey would talk about the target straight through processing of KYC or know your supplier, know your customer data, straight through in real-time onboarding. So I get in the once-only principle my entire KYC records. I use them for simple straight-through onboarding in real-time in Industry 4.0 use cases, but also in business-to-government use cases, supply chain use cases, professional service use cases. So there's a big kind of vision behind it, and we have the ability to execute in the European Union to do it. But in order to do it, for example, the onboarding, we need semantics, and this is what Mikael will look into today. And just as part of the introduction, Mikael is also a workstream lead in the so-called VBuild. So VBuild is a large-scale pilot of the European Commission to push the European business wallet, to push legal person identity forward, to establish the standards, to do kind of early field testing in large scale. And Mikael is leading the Semantic group, which is kind of the topic for today, and which is really the core of interoperability, but the Finnish Tax Administration colleagues are also part of the Foreign Tax Declaration, and they will contribute to the business payments. And now I hand over to Mikael. Mikael, it's a pleasure and honor to have you on our webinar. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much for your kind words. Just checking a few things. Audio, can you hear me? Great.
Loud and clear.
Then I'll do the screen sharing here. So I had my presentation, and then I'd rather have it in presentation mode. So let's see if I can. There we go. So can you see my screen and the presentation in presentation mode? Yes. Also?
Looks good. Looks fantastic.
Really nice. So thank you for the opportunity to come and speak about personally a very dear issue, which I hope is finding itself to become more and more important also in the European context, namely semantic interoperability. A few words about myself. I am, as mentioned, a development specialist at the Finnish Tax Administration, but in this particular context, I'd rather point out myself as a specialist in interoperability issues on a governmental level, since I've been participating in Finnish national governmental working groups since the early 2000s, a number of working groups and projects, all aiming at enhancing, first and foremost, the semantic interoperability in the context of the Finnish public sector. But the same issues, they dive up in cross-border situations, and especially also in cross-border situations because of the disparity of the information that is being shared. For instance, in Finland, of course, we have one business register and one tax administration registry, so it's easy to share information and make it understandable. But in a business context with cross-border activities, the semantics are disparate in different countries. So we need to have some kind of aligning there. My presentation structure looks like this. Not much information here, but we'll get to the different sections soon, and I'll talk about why semantic interoperability should be considered as important, and especially, of course, the context here being the European digital wallets, and especially then the EU business wallet initiative launched by the EU Commission lately. No one really knows what an EU business wallet actually is, but we have some clues because we worked on these matters in the EWC large-scale pilot together with Spherity, for instance. What should be done is a second part of my presentation, and then I have to delve into the classical standard answer to this, which is use standards, and I'll show that it's a good statement, but it's not that easy necessarily always to use standards. So how should we proceed then? And that in this part of my presentation, I'll present some ideas about how to do the trick using a special methodology that we have developed for the Finnish public sector, and special tooling also. When should we do this? There we will delve into the timetables of the WeBuild consortium, starting in August this autumn, and the last one where I'll tackle also the question of whether this should be only an EU initiative or actually be taken to a global level. So first, some words about the why. I happened to be in Stockholm last week in a semantic modeling event together with colleagues from other Nordic tax administrations. And we had a brainstorming session at some point where we were discussing why are we promoting semantic interoperability and semantic modeling of data. And from this discussion and the notes on a whiteboard, I picked some good points here to raise up as an answer to this question. So originally, of course, it's all about, from the public sector perspective, it's about implementing the once only principle, which might be familiar to you, that information shouldn't be asked from the customer, the individual or the company only once actually, and if the information is resides already in the public sector databases in one or another agency, then the agencies should exchange information among themselves. So it's essential, of course, then for cross-border services, and it also makes data collected for any agency's legal purposes usable in other contexts. That has been a really difficult matter, for instance, in the national discussion. is an agency actually allowed to share data collected for a legal purpose to even to the customer, him or herself, to be used in other contexts. And there, especially the digital wallets might prove a good tool. It also then enables something we call the life event and business event-based integrated public-private service processes. Ooh, that was a long one. So basically, there's an ongoing movement in the public sectors of EU member states to address people's life events as the key to public services, not so much that you would organize services according to organization or function, but look at what's happening in the life of a person or in the activities of a business, and then somehow to coordinate those events and make them as automated as possible. For instance, the birth of a child or the death of a relative or something like that. It's also a key element, this semantic interoperability, for the introducing the my data concept, so that people could have a better view of what information is stored in public sector databases, could use that information for their own purposes and be more in control of the data that is gathered about people and companies also in the public sectors. A couple of more answers to this question. Of course, it could diminish the amount of data to be reported by companies. There was an interesting study by the Estonian Ministry of Economics that in Estonia alone, companies are supposed to report all in all more than 420 different reports to the government containing some 60,000 different data points. And when they started to look at the actual reports and their contents, they soon realized that almost 95% of the information was overlapping. It was probably just stated in different wordings using different concepts, but anyway, there's very much overlap in this sort of functions. One of the key things I think that both the wallets will enable and then the underlying requirement of semantic interoperability also when using business wallets especially is that they enable automated processes. So information shared through wallets or otherwise over APIs to people to be read by people and interpreted by people, that doesn't necessarily need to be exactly semantically aligned, but when we are introducing machines, algorithms or APIs that want to consume this data, it should be described in a consistent way. So also AI agents, once we get to there, they will be enjoying the more qualitative data that is provided, for instance, through the digital wallets, then to be consumed. And also legislation. This is an interesting topic that I could actually have another talk about. We have done some work regarding semantically interoperable legislation also in the Finnish government. I worked a couple of years ago together with the Finnish Ministry of the Environment, and we did some good work in this area, but I leave it at that. And as also the semantic interoperability has finally been recognized as a core element in the promotion of European data spaces. A couple of words of that later on. Next part here in my presentation, what should be accomplished then? Well, actually, almost what we would need would be a global or at least a regional business information data space. And why am I talking about data spaces in this context? Well, if we look at the description of common European data spaces that are promoted by the European Commission, the so-called, what I call traditional view of data spaces is that it's something that enables data sharing from data providers to data consumers. And the role of the data space is then to create an infrastructure for the actual physical sharing of data. Why would data providers share data? Well, you need, of course, to incorporate then incentives for providers. So they could be monetary compensation or other incentives. And then the important thing, of course, with what I call traditional data spaces is that it allows the data consumers then to use the shared data as an asset in their own business activities. So you can make some new business based on the data, of course, that you get through the sharing. And one interesting aspect through the Data Act legislation and Data Governance Act is that the EU tries to foster also EU citizens to join in the data sharing. So we talk about the data altruism, which would lead to anonymized personal data to be used then for profit-seeking activities, or at least for research in the research context. My version here about a data space that I call, this is just my naming of it, it would be called a business information data space, can be called whatever. It would actually be something that would enable the implementation of these My Data principles for businesses. So we would get the access to governmental register data, and companies and individuals, of course, also could use them for their own purposes. So instead of data altruism, sharing data, it would actually promote something you could call data egoism, data that would benefit me or my company better. And of course, if we have access to data from both public sector registries in an understandable format, and also from company data systems or any types of data vaults, that would allow for the automation of business processes, both in domestic and especially in cross-border activities, provided that the data space enables the semantic interoperability. And this might be then, of course, this kind of a thinking about the data space for business information. It could be a good, a powerful business capability if you combine it with the thought of the European business wallet. So for myself, my own purposes, I launched this concept of a verifiable, semantically interoperable data product. You know, data products are the data shared in a data space, but they are usually not that well described because it's up to the domain to decide what type of data. Is it raw data or Excel sheets or CSV files or JSON or XML that is being exchanged. But in the business information data space, we should strive for semantic interoperability and then use technologies that support semantic interoperability. So therefore, a quick jump over to the data space community. And I was really glad last year already in 2024 when I started to read the Data Space Support Center's new blueprint for data spaces, that there was a special passage actually for data interoperability, and even some recommendations for how to model data in the context of basically any data space. And from this data modeling recommendation, I just want to lift up here a few passages here that actually now the Data Space Support Center at least recommends that data spaces should consider shared data models or semantic standards. And these models serve as dictionaries that enable data providers and data consumers to speak the same language when exchanging data. This is really cool. And the good thing is that the DSSC not only promotes this kind of thinking, but they actually provide some ideas about how this should be done. So here we have a chart about the conceptual model of this data models building block, and it's quite simple. But anyway, it's refreshing to see that we have the data product to the right, and it's semantically expressed in a data model, and not any data model, but actually a data model that builds on an interesting foundation of different artifacts. We have a data schema that expresses what is called an application profile. That is an application of an ontology that uses terminology from a vocabulary. Wow, that's complex. But luckily it's completely aligned to, for instance, what the W3C has promoted as what they call the semantic web stack that has been in place already for 2 decades almost. So there's basically nothing new here, but then of course it's the question of how to do this. I mean, what kind of tooling and methodology and so forth. Yeah, here are the, you can actually check this out. The Data Space Support Center Blueprint 2.0 is easily to be found on the internet. And I'll just lift these details. There's still room for choosing other technologies, of course. If you feel that you are more XML oriented, then you would use XML schema and schematron. If you have CSV oriented data, then you would use something else and so forth. But in the business information context, especially, if we are targeting this business information database towards the EU business wallets, then I think this is the stack that we should build upon. And actually, let's make a small change here, not only JSON schema, but actually JSON LD, because the application profiles or the shackle shapes that you build on top of the old ontology, they can then be serialized into JSON LD, meaning that they still preserve the linkage to the underlying semantic. So we have linked data going all the way from the description of the data to the actual data product. So instead of just talking about an EU business wallet ecosystem, simply like this as a box, we can actually start dividing it into different layers. And we would actually have something then called an EU business activity ecosystem. So different business activities that we want to conduct with the assistance or through the capabilities of, for instance, the EU business wallet. Alone, of course, the EU business wallet is not enough. You need other capabilities also, but we start to build that. So a choice of selected cross-border business processes should be included here. So it's kind of a rule book about which business processes should be built upon the foundation of the EUBW. And then we need the data sharing infrastructure. Of course, the EUBW is just a tool. There could be other ways of sharing data also, still traditional APIs and things like that. But anyway, all of the technical data sharing infrastructure should be relying on the EU business information data space with the data products that are building on something that I personally at the moment label the EU common business vocabulary. We can rename it later, but common because it should be used by everyone, and it should be a business vocabulary, not only a core vocabulary, but actually encompassing all the artifacts, the data models that are needed for these business processes. So it's the orange layer here that decides what information is needed, and all the information needed in the business processes should be reflected into the business vocabulary. So we need definitions and concepts and things like that for all of these data artifacts. And everything should, of course, be W3C linked data. Okay, now a short glimpse into the use standards. Yep, I would like to use standards. I will use standards. The WeBuild will build on standards, but which standards and how should we do this? I was a bit lazy, so I had a classical ChatGPT chat here asking, could ChatGPT just list global or regional standards that are actually following the W3C semantic web or linked data stack, and other standards that might be relevant for the business processes that are not in this expressed in this way. And interesting listing, I could have actually identified almost all of these myself. I made some notes by bolding and putting in some colors. My own, I've looked into these myself, and the GS1 web vocabulary is at the moment the best, or the one that follows these standards most purely, so to say. So it's pure linked data that you actually build something upon. If you find something in the GS1 web vocabulary, you can link to that and reuse those artifacts. Another really important one is to the right, the EU core vocabularies. They are very close of being actually reusable. And there's only one small glitch, actually, I'll tell you a bit later on. It has to do with the publication of the core vocabularies. They are not published as an online resource, but mainly for offline use. Then there was an interesting, one of my favorite vocabularies that I've been using myself in modeling is the UN CEFACT buy, ship, pay vocabulary in its JSON LD format. But I somehow knew more than ChatGPT that it's not actually pure linked data. And then I asked ChatGPT, is it truly RDF all based? Then the short answer is then not really. So we are here building on something that is derived from the existing UN CEFACT core component library, and then it's published in, for instance, in JSON LD online, so you can use it. And now I'm not really that a technical person that I could say what this is this a problem or not, but we have to discuss it also then in WeBuild, how we do we want to affect to talk with the UN CEFACT people that should they do something about this or not. A bigger problem at the moment is then standards that are not in linked data format, and I also recognized basically all of these, and to me personally, I highlighted 3 that are kind of a problem. Not the US CEFACT CCL as such, because buy ship pay is very crucial for business processes, and there are other reference data models that build on the core component library, that's CCL. But it's still the old core component library is still XML UML based. And then we have UBL, which is an offspring actually originally from the UN CEFACT CCL by Oasis. So it's very strictly adhering to XML as syntax, and well, we'll see about the semantics soon, what they look like. And then we have PEPL. PEPL is good, but then again, it's not good. It's because the good thing is that it's standard based. It's the PEPL documents are strictly adhering to UBL, so they are as syntax they use UBL, but then again, it's XML, and the underlying semantics are not that clearly defined. There's a curious detail actually in this work. Some 15-20 years ago, I actually was the person who chaired the national Finnish XML naming convention group. So I've been chairing a group that was promoting the use of XML in the Finnish public sector. But now at the moment, I'm a bit worried that can't we skip that XML already, because it's not so good for semantic interoperability. Yeah, then just shortly a couple of examples about these standards. I mean, it's nice to have standards. Here is, for instance, a technical recommendation that has been, I think, published already. This was a draft from a couple of years ago about the so-called e-receipt. So it's a subset of the invoice content. It's actually also a simplified electronic invoice. So it's part of the EN 16931 family. This is the EN 16931-8. And when you look at how do they model semantics in CEN, it looks like this, and there's the face that's me, because I don't think this is the way forward how to define semantics. Of course, there's a definition of semantics. You have a business term and a description and a usage note and so forth. But if you publish it as a PDF that you have to pay for, that's not really interoperable, and that's not linked data, definitely. The other 2 that we need to probably follow content-wise, the UN CEFACT CCL, the core component library, and UBL. The underlying technology they are following is or the way how things are modeled is pretty. The only reason I put this slide here is because it's complex. So the CCTS core component technical system is quite complex. You have artifacts that are generic, and then you turn them into business information entities, and there's lots of relationships. And in the end, the semantics are actually published like this. So this could be UN CEFACT also, but it's UBL. So tables. Excel tables that you can download, and there you get to know, of course, all the classes, attributes, and associations, and how they should be used. But it's still, yeah, it's far from linked data, and then the only syntax that can be used is XML. So not nice this either. So let's hope there is an improvement in this area. So how should we proceed then? This is a good question. Now I have some proposals and some answers to this, at least in WeBuild. We tried this already in EWC, large-scale pilot regarding wallets, but we didn't really manage to convince the whole consortium about this way of going forward. So let's hope WeBuild will show that this is the way, at least regarding the EU business wallet. I think this is the way to go forward. So we used the WeBuild large-scale pilot as an opportunity to develop a methodology for the creation of a common semantic foundation for generic data products used in business processes. And now I switched to marketing mode, because I mentioned that we have the tools already in Finland. We have a method and a platform or tools developed to do this by the Finnish government. So we'll at least try to use these in WeBuild also, and we have used them in international context. I'll tell you soon about that. So what is the Finnish interoperability platform? Shortly, it's a tool set that enables you to create linked data, starting from terminologies, ending up in data vocabularies and application profiles, and then you use also a reference data tool for code lists. So you can use this separately, but in the WeBuild context, we'll try to use at least the data vocabulary tool. Let's hope to use the terminology tool also, because then we can actually define the concepts that are then used as classes and attributes and associations, and also in reference data. So this terminology tool, which produces SCOS ontologies, that's kind of a thing that's a bit difficult to introduce, because that type of modeling doesn't really exist in other contexts. So yeah, shortly, what's the Finnish interoperability platform? We have a tool for data vocabularies. So there we can do two types of artifacts. We can manage and publish core vocabularies. You can also call them core component libraries if you want to, and then application profiles, which specialize the core components. And everything is linked data. You have reference data, so if you need code lists, you can do them here, or you can use external code lists, of course. And terminologies is kind of the foundation. It's if you want to do it properly, you need to define what do you mean by this and this concept, and then when the concept is linked to a class or attribute or association, then it's in the context. For instance, in the business information data space, this and this concept is used as a class or an attribute. Yeah, and we have some other tools also that might not be used in this context. Yeah, objectives. Well, I'll jump over this. You can read the original. This is like the marketing stuff from the Finnish Digitalization Agency about the toolset. But this is the cool part here. We are back in the data space support centers picture or chart. And the Finnish Digitalization Agency, who is currently responsible for the maintenance and development of this platform, they mapped all their tools to the requirements here in the recommendation, and they mapped to 100%. So actually we have here everything in place. With the tool set we can create data schemas, preferably probably JSON-LD. They build on application profiles that are expressed in shackle as shackle shapes, and those are then built on ontologies that are a pure OL at the moment. And the ontologies themselves can, if you want to be complete, then you link to terminologies, to conceptual models expressed in SCOS. And everything can be done on the platform with the help of these tools. The only drawback in international context at the moment is, of course, that the tool is the namespace of the tool is suomi.fi, so it means that we probably need to do something about that in order to internationalize the end products. If we publish things, they shouldn't be published as Finnish artifacts, but we need to have some other namespace for these things. But that shouldn't be a problem either. One concrete example of how to do the modeling. We did already some work on this in EWC. So this is an EU legislation example. You might have heard of the company law directive amendment. Last year it came into force in December, and an interesting thing what it introduces is this one. So this is a novelty, harmonized unified EU company certificate to be implemented by member states in maybe 2027 or something like that. And here's the list of data elements or attributes that should be included here. So the text is quite small, but you can Google it later, of course. Now the problem here is then it's to be implemented by all 27 member states, and the business register authorities need to find these data elements or attributes in their registers. How do we ensure that all implementers understand the requirements in a uniform way? And how do we ensure that there will be cross-border usability of these EU company certificates? And even more importantly, because it's actually stated in this company law directive amendment that this type of a certificate you should be able to issue it into an EU digital wallet once the wallets are in place. How do we ensure that the electronic attestation of attributes that is then labeled the EU company certificate is coherent enough that it's semantically interoperable with all 27 member state business registries? This is a good question. We did an exercise on this already actually in the Nordic countries. Luckily, we had the resources because we have had a cross organizational project between business registers and tax administrations for a couple of years. It ended last year. So this, I just refer to it. It was called Nordic Smart Government and Business. And we used this methodology of the Finnish methodology and the tools to create something, some artifacts that we call Nordic this and that. And this chart here just shows what the artifacts are. And in my mind, personally, we should copy this to European level, at least in the WeBuild context. We'll try to do that. So what did we do in the Nordic countries? We started with the terminology tool. So we created a SCOS ontology with the core business concepts and the terms that represent these concepts relating to information that mainly resides in business registers at the time. And based on these core concepts, of course, we had to use English here as a common language, which makes it even more difficult. But we managed to do a core business terminology, and that was then reused because it's linked data. It was reused in what we call the Nordic core business vocabulary. And there, all the concepts are turned into classes, attributes, and associations. And what's even more important is that actually we don't want to invent something new for the Nordic area, but we want to reuse existing standards. So there's the reference then to what in this slide is called the ISA Square core. That's actually the implementation of the EU core vocabularies that we really want to use. We want to align to the EU core vocabularies that have been published by the CEMIC team of DG Digit. And if necessary, not at the moment we haven't found it necessary yet, but we also want to connect to the UN CEFACT models and UBL and probably other models also. But for now we have focused on core components like core concepts actually like legal entity, legal form, activity, registration date, identifier, and things like that. And all of this can be found actually in the ISA Square. I shouldn't call it ISA Square any longer. It's just a local implementation that we had. The cool thing here is then that once we have the business vocabulary in place, we can start to identify application profiles or actual information exchange models, like for instance, the EU company certificate here. And all of the data elements that are needed according to the directive in the EU company certificate, they should be found then in the core business vocabulary and relate to some terminology in the Nordic business terminology. And the cool thing then with the platform also is that it actually produces automatically the export formats. So from this shackle shape of a EU company certificate or a power of attorney or a ultimate beneficial ownership certificate, then we can have these export formats that can be used. And presently, I think, of course, it's the JSON LD format that is the most interesting for the wallets. Some screenshots. I won't go into detail how this is used. You can direct message me, for instance, on LinkedIn if you want to have a presentation about the tools at some point. I gladly do that. So we have the terminology tool where you can define concepts and relationships between concepts, everything in SCOS. Then we have the core business vocabulary that reuses those concepts and creates an OL ontology or an OL vocabulary. And in here also we do the linking to other external namespaces if they are available, if they are published as linkable linked data, which as previously mentioned is a bit of a problem at the moment. Finally, you create for a specific information exchange or for a specific data product like the EU company certificate, you create a shackle shape. And as you can see, actually, from a business expert perspective, this is quite cool because it's really all about concepts. It's really all about data, how it's described, terms and their relationships, and not the technicalities. I don't even personally really know how to create all entities or how to do shackle, but the tool does it for me. So that's a cool thing. And then we have the code lists also. So we had a discussion about legal forms, for instance, in the Nordic context. What are the legal forms that should be used? And the export formats presently are listed here, so you can get then an JSON LD or a JSON schema or Open API export of this. This is an interesting example of how this has been then used. All Nordic governments actually concluded that they will use the Nordic core business vocabulary and do some physical APIs to the business registers based on this harmonized data model. And this is the Norwegian example. There is actually in production a Norwegian API in the Norwegian business register from which you can actually search for company information from all Nordic countries. So you just express the company, the national business ID, and then the country from which you want to search, and you will receive information like from Finland, for instance. You can get the Finnish company information because it's interconnected. So it's kind of like Breeze, but Breeze on steroids. Breeze is a lookup system. We are creating an API where you can actually get the information. And then you could turn this into a verifiable credential. Cool. I'm looking at the clock here also. It's ticking. I think I have a few minutes left. I had some examples here also about what we have been doing in the EWC context. I think the Know Your Customer is not so important because I'll jump just over to this page. What we did regarding the KYCs, we tested with wallets and issuers and relating parties a cross-border business scenario where a Finnish company was applying for a corporate bank account in a fictive German bank. And there, among the verifiable credentials or attestations that were presented to the relying party, we had the legal PID and also this EU company certificate according to the model that we had developed. So it has been kind of tested also in piloting context. Of course, this is not really production ready yet, but in WeBuild it will be. And another example of the problems with modeling data today and how it could be made easier with the help of the methodology is the so-called V-receipt or the E-receipt. I showed you already the technical recommendation from SEN, and we try to use it in the EWC context. A bit tricky because there's just a new UML data model, and then the syntax to be used is supposed to be either the cross-industry invoice from CEFACT or EDIFACT or then UBL. And you need to go to the UBL definitions and try to map what SEN has designed as a semantic model, and then they say that the syntax is to be found in UBL, and these things don't map easily. We had experts who had been participating in this work actually, and they couldn't find the right artifacts right away. So it would be much easier if we would have a this is a screenshots from the tool, from the data vocabulary tool, that we have a OL vocabulary. Actually, this is a local copy of UBL. So you have, instead of having this to the left, you have an OL version of UBL. And from there, you can actually easily then make these shackle shapes and then export them into a format that from which you can derive a verifiable credential like this one. Yeah, when will we start then the work? Well, now actually in August. So I'm talking now about WeBuild, of course. And WeBuild, as Carsten mentioned, I'm leading the semantics group, which is part of the WP4, the working package 4 general capabilities. And we will get involved with all of the business cases here and ask for their information needs and then try to model the business vocabulary according to that. So I had here a screenshot about, or a chart about how we will model things. We will do things probably in parallel. This is not set in stone yet. This is actually our host Spherity has provided me with their modeling paradigm, how they would how they would do this, and of course it's a bit more traditional because it includes the use of UML and ER diagrams. And then your information model still in UML, and then someone skilled enough has to turn this into a formalized ontology with RDF classes and properties, and then make the serialization into JSON LD. But if you use the Finnish methodology and tool, then even a business person can learn to do this. So we'll do these things in parallel, I think. We'll use both the interoperability platform and then other tools, and then present as a report at least to the Commission that, hey, there are these two options at least how to do this. Yeah, business people can model these themselves, and interoperability platform hide the technical complexity. And here's some timelines for the everything is just in a real early planning stage for the WeBuild. So we have 24 months, and when we need to agree on how we will work together with the business use cases. And also, actually, we have identified the need to discuss with the EU Commission itself, because it's a pity if everything created by a large-scale pilot is just ending when the large-scale pilot is finished. I think especially for the semantic work, we need to have a continuity. So I would propose that actually this business information data space should be founded already during the project stage. Yeah, now I'm running out of time. I had a mention here. You can take a look at this when you get the materials. I'm also going to participate in a UN CEFACT global project, which is quite similar, verifiable trade documents. Imagine a world where trade documents are verifiable and equally consumable by human and machines. Yeah, I am imagining a world. So I will participate here. And the cool thing is that we will be doing probably things in a totally similar way, building on the UN CEFACT BSP, using linked data, and also linking to the World Customs Organization data model, the GS1 vocabulary. As I mentioned, it's easy to link to that, and schema.org and so forth. So this is from the KTDDE work. It's actually absolutely similar as the other modeling. First, you need to do a terminology, and then you need to create a core vocabulary that you link to the reference models you want to use. And then finally, each trade document, there are going to be 36 trade documents defined here. They will be published as application profiles, or hopefully as shackle shapes that can be then serialized as JSON LD. Okay, final words. What do we need actually in the context of WeBuild EU business wallets? Well, the aim is, of course, automation through digitalization. And I feel that, first of all, you need to address the question, which business processes should be automated? And then you need the data for these business processes, what data is consumed by the business process, what is produced by the business process. Rules is an interesting thing, as I mentioned, about the possibility to do semantically interoperable legislation also, but that's not for now. But anyway, all of this needs common semantics. So both the processes, the data, the rules should be built upon a common semantic foundation, a layer here. Yeah, and I had some pictures about, you can check these out yourselves, actually, how this should be done then once we get into a permanent governance model. So there should be some kind of a governing body for this and things and so forth. But I think we're running out of time, so you can just check these two final slides yourselves, actually. Oh, okay. Hey, thank you for listening. And we still have maybe 10 minutes for comments, questions, or...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for your brilliant presentation. So we will share the link to the slides after the webinar and also video recording. I think this was one of the questions. And yeah, so we had a lot of questions. I would like to pick one from Bo Harald. He also mentioned AI. Yeah. I think, Mikael, you also have thought about European business wallets, semantics, power of attorney, and AI. Maybe you can shed some lights of your thinking about this.
Now, this is a tricky one. Of course, I've been mainly following. I'm in a bubble in LinkedIn where I read about people who have been dealing with trying to promote ontologies and knowledge graphs for ages, and now finally they feel that their time has come. So I'm really curious. I've understood that it's would be a good thing for the use of AI agents to have a semantic foundation for, or that all the data used there in different contexts by the AI agents, it can be verifiable, trustworthy, but also that it's semantically coherent, that it follows the same semantic foundation. So it would lead to more qualitative results, as I've understood. But that's kind of all I would like to say say out loudly about that.
Yeah, maybe we can open the floor for more questions. Power of attorney. I think we had power of attorney topic.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We think that the power. Actually, we have been doing some modeling already in EWC, and luckily we have had some really qualitative participants, really skilled, knowledgeable people there. For instance, from the Dutch Business Register, we did some cooperation, and we are trying to model a very generic and very comprehensive power of attorney model that could be then used to produce what can be called a power of attorney. The interesting power of attorney can be named a dozen different things. That's actually, is it a mandate or an authorization, or does it show representational rights or things like that? But power of attorney is it's a good label for the and what kind of things need to be taken into account when you create something that can be then used in the EU business wallets, for instance, maybe when you need probably anyway to show that a person or a machine can represent the company doing certain things in a certain scope, and everything should be machine readable and machine executable, of course. It's a really interesting subject that we will delve into. Yeah.
Excellent. I think then we had another question from Emeka about what type of semantic models and ontologies are developed or will be developed for the European business model, because I think we have semantic richness, we have endless of kind of data structures in B2B, B2G, Industry 4.0 supply chain. Maybe you can share a bit on shed some light on the priorities in terms of semantic models.
Yeah, it's in the WeBuild context, of course, because there's a myriad of things out there. So we need to focus on the business needs. And in this sense, the business needs will come from the selected business use cases that are being then worked upon in the consortium. And our hope is that each business use case is able to express, like in a process diagram or a information workflow, what type of information exchange is needed in the process. Like, for instance, I could give an example. The KYC, that is probably not enough that we exchange information about the company itself. For instance, if a company wants to open a bank account in another country, you need then the EU company certificate. You probably need information about the ultimate business ownership. Probably you also need something that is not stored in business register at the moment, and that's the shareholder list or ledger. And that will be a tricky one because it has to be incorporated or implemented by the companies themselves. So it's kind of a selected list of proposed data models that we then need to look into this common vocabulary and try to fit there, so that it fits the vocabulary. The vocabulary stays the same, but the different data products or data objects that are being moved in the processes, that they fit the process also. But of course, I mean, there will be huge demand for all kinds of things, and that will probably be outside the scope of WeBuild. But anyway, let's hope that we can actually nail down at least those information needs that are in the use cases involved.
Yeah. Then we had another question from Victor. But before I ask this question, maybe, Mikael, you can talk a bit about comparison in terms of human identity card, and then the semantic richness in the Industry 4.0. So that's on the B2B and financial services and you name it. But I think the semantic richness is a big difference compared to human identity use case with an identity card, and then let's say the B2B, B2G use cases in terms of the requirements, semantic requirements and richness. Maybe you can share some examples with regard to this comparison.
Yeah, the person use case is often referred to as, it's more like attestations that you receive as a citizen or as an individual from the state or regional authorities, and you, in a use case context, you usually just present maybe a selected number of attributes about yourself, whether you're of a certain age or you have the you can drive, you have the requirements to drive a car or something like that. But in business context, we have nationally we have looked upon the lifespan of an enterprise and seen that you really need to break it down kind of into different sections of the lifespan of an enterprise. You have the foundation of an enterprise. In WeBuild, for instance, we will look into the create a branch in another country. So that's kind of a situation where a company wants to expand and start opening up filials in other countries, and what's included there, like what's the procedure and what type of information do you need to share to the authorities in the other country. Then we have the bulk like business documents that revolve around trade in general, like tenders or request for quotation or quotations, offers, orders, order fulfillments. Then we have the shipping area, of course. Once things are settled, that someone buys something from someone and it's a physical product, then it needs to be transported. So we have the logistics area there. And all the time there are the financials, of course. There's the invoicing part and what needs to be reported to shareholders, to stakeholders, to the government about the financial results of this. So it's really a it's really a big picture. It's more than an elephant. You really need to find the chunks which we will concentrate upon. And I think there are some good starts in the WeBuild, for instance, if we manage to look at the logistics, also the supply chain, and see if the information elements there are similar to the ones in the procurement process, of course, then we can do some semantic alignment there. So yeah, I wouldn't at this point want to say too much more about the complex surrounding of the enterprise information because it's really a complex thing, and we will start from the basics, from the business register information, tax related information, and then move forward to selected areas that are presented by the use cases in the consortium.
I think this also nicely answers the question from Victor, where the questions of the JSON AD format and some use cases. I think this is good, and I think what I also like that you say, hey, let's first things first, which is basically the foundation of the company, the control structure from the registry, and then extend the semantic models and the use cases from there. I think that's also a very good kind of, let's say, approach here. Yeah, further questions? There was a question in terms of how to convince the EU Commission for, I think, the type of an implementing act to define the EU certificate to enable interoperable semantics, yeah, for the EU certificate, but also then for the KYC records, and also to convince EU Commission and send Senelec for a standard for e-invoicing, which data model can comply with W3C technologies and so with the European business wallet.
Yeah, regarding the invoice, of course, one interesting area is VAT in a digital age. So the VIDA requirement in 2030 that we all companies in Europe need to switch to electronic invoicing. And what is the standard? Well, the standard has semantically been set already by the EN 16931. But then the implementation, of course, how do you do it? You can do it with PEPL documents, but in the wallet area, it would be good that we would have the possibility to define a data model based on the business vocabulary that would fulfill the requirements from the European norm for e-invoicing. That would be the ideal, of course. One troublesome issue is, of course, that most of these data information exchange related issues in the EU, they should be implemented as regulations, I think, instead of directives, because directives, as you know, they always give the leeway for member states to then implement them in national legislation, and there's a big risk that we lose the interoperability there, because everyone is doing slight changes. But if there would be a strict regulation with implementing acts and then someone would do the technical definition, maybe that's the way.
Excellent, Mikael. Yeah, I think we basically close with a policy advice, and I think we kind of push this also via the Rebuild Consortium to the European Commission and to DG Connect. Thank you for joining our seminar as a speaker, Mikael, and to the audience for attending the seminar. And yeah, wish you great success with the Rebuild Consortium and looking forward to staying in touch. And for everyone else, reach out to Mikael and me for follow-up questions. We're happy to answer your questions. And to all of us, good success in implementing the European Business Wallet. Thank you, Mikael.
Thank you.